The Indo-Pakistani War of 1965 saw the Indian and Pakistani air forces engaged in large-scale aerial combat against each other for the first time since the independence of Pakistan in 1947. The war took place during the course of September 1965 and saw both air forces conduct defensive and offensive operations over Indian and Pakistani airspace. Both countries made contradictory claims regarding the number of losses that they suffered and the number of planes that they claimed to have shot down. Indian losses have been placed at between 59 and 110, while Pakistani losses were between 18 and 43. Background: the war began in early August 1965 and initially the fighting was confined mainly to the ground. Later, however, as the war progressed, the war took on another dimension as the two sides began air operations against each other. Although the two forces had previously taken part in the First Kashmir War, which had occurred shortly after the independence of Pakistan in 1947, that engagement had been limited in scale compared to the 1965 conflict, and the air operations that both sides had undertaken were limited and largely confined to interdiction and other strategic purposes such as resupply and troop transport operations. Although there had been one incident where Indian fighter aircraft intercepted a Pakistani transport, there had been no significant air-to-air combat. During the 1965 conflict, however, the PAF flew a total 2,364 sorties while the IAF flew 3,937 sorties. Main battle. The aerial phase of the war began on 1 September 1965 when the Indian Air Force responded to an urgent call for airstrikes against the Pakistani Army, which had launched an attack known as Operation Grand Slam. The IAF's 45 Squadron was tasked to carry out close air support missions in support of Indian troops. The squadron had recently been moved from Pune to Pathankot after a merger of No. 220 Squadron into it, under the command of Squadron LDR SK Marshal Dar. 3 missions of 4 aircraft each were tasked, with the first wave taking off at 1,719 hours. These strafed Pakistani positions and attacked Pakistani tanks and ground targets, though a lot of damage from friendly fire was also reported later on. The Indian aircraft were intercepted by 2 Pakistan Air Force F-86 Sabres, flown by S.L. Sarfraz Rafiqi of No. 5 Squadron and F.L. Imtiaz Bhatti of No. 15 Squadron. In the ensuing dogfight, 4 YF Vampires were lost, 1 from the first wave and 3 from the second. After this, the IAF immediately withdrew about 130 Vampires, together with over 50 Uragans, from frontline service. On the 2nd of September, both sides flew in support of the ground forces, however no major aerial engagement was observed. The appearance of the Sabres necessitated a move by the IAF to send the fallen Nat fighters to the forward base of Pathankot. IAF used Mysteers flying at slow speed as bait to lure Sabres to attack where the waiting Nats will take them on. 2 Sabres were scrambled, but one had to turn back without entering the fight when the pilot couldn't jettison the fuel tanks. The other one, flown by FLT-LT Yusuf Ali Khan, spotted the IAF planes and tried positioning himself behind them before attacking. Just as he got his crosshairs on them, he felt thuds on his own jet, as he was surrounded in a cloud of Nats repeatedly being attacked. A Lockheed F-104 starfighter lurking in the area was pointed to the dogfight by base control, along with scrambling another one from base. The first starfighter crossed through the dogfight at supersonic speed. The Nats, after scoring a kill, started egressing. IAF squadron leader Trevor J. Keylor of No. 23 Squadron claimed to have shot down the F-86 Sabre on that day, claiming the first air combat victory for the RAF of the war, and subsequently received the Virchakra and the title of Sabre Slayer. However, the Sabre he shot down was flown in badly damaged condition and somehow rough-landed back at the base. The Sabre pilot FLT Yusuf Ali Khan was given Satara-e-Jarat for surviving dogfight with 6 Nats and bringing the damaged Sabre back home. In the same incident, an IF Nat pilot was overheard warning others of the incoming starfighter. Also, a Nat piloted by squadron leader Brij Pal Singh Sakand mistakenly landed at an abandoned airstrip in Pasrur, when he thought he had safely crossed the border. His takeoff attempt was aborted due to pre-scene of a Pakistan Army jeep on the runway. He was taken prisoner and later handed over to PAF. A Lockheed F-104 starfighter flown by FLT Hakimullah Khan chasing in at supersonic speed was also credited with forcing the Nat down. This Nat is displayed as a war trophy in the Pakistan Air Force Museum, Karachi, after it was flown from Pasrur by Squadron LDR Saad Hatmi, who flew the captured aircraft back to Sargodha, and later tested and evaluated its flight performance. Was of the personal view that Nat was no Sabre Slayer when it came to dogfighting. On the 4th of September, an F-86 Sabre was lost. The PAF claimed the cause to be friendly ground fire, while the IAF claimed to have shot it down. Rafiki was shot down over Halwara on the 6th of September, while Bhatti ended the war with 34 combat missions to his credit, the maximum combat missions flown by any pilot during the war. During the conflict, the Pakistani F-86 Sabre flying ace, Muhammad Mahmud Alam, shot down 7 Indian aircraft, including claims of 2 as probable. 5 Hawker Hunter aircraft were shot down in 1 minute, of which 4 were brought down in 30 seconds. However, his claims were never confirmed by the PAF and are referred as obvious fake. On September 6, the Indian Army crossed the border at Lahore to relieve pressure on the Chambjorian sector. On the evening of the same day, the PAF responded with attacks on Indian airfields at Pathankot, Adampur and Halwara. The attack on Pathankot was successful, while the attacks on Adampur and Halwara were failures. The IAF lost almost 10 aircraft on the ground at Pathankot. The Adampur strike turned back before even reaching Adampur, while at Halwara 2 of the 3 attacking raiders were shot down for the loss of 2 Indian hunters in air combat. Both the Indian pilots survived as they ejected over the base, whereas the intruding Pakistani pilots were killed in action. This included the ace squadron leader Sarfaraz Rafiki, who had shot down 2 vampires on the 1st of September. Before being shot down, Rafiki is credited with shooting down the first of the hunters. He was later posthumously awarded the Satara-e-Jarat for the Chamber action and the Hilal-i-Jarat for the Halwara action. On the 7th of September 1965, the PAF parachuted 135 Special Services Group para-commandos at 3 Indian airfields. The daring attempt proved to be an unmitigated disaster. Only 10 commandos were able to return to Pakistan, the rest were taken as prisoners of war. At Halwara and Adampur, these troops landed in residential areas where the villagers caught and handed them over to police. Also on the 7th of September, the IAF mounted 33 sorties against the heavily guarded PAF airfield complex at Sargodha. The IAF lost 2 musketeers and 3 hunters due to the defense mounted by the PAF's local squadrons. One of the Indian hunter pilots, who were ejected near Sargodha, was made prisoner and released after the war. One of the crippled musketeers flying flying solo got involved in a dogfight with an F-104 starfighter and each somehow shot the other down. The Pakistani pilot safely ejected, while the Indian pilot, squadron leader Ajamada B. Devar, was killed. Squadron leader Devar was awarded the Mahavir Chakra for his bravery 23 years later, after his feat was revealed by an author appointed by the PAF to write its official history of the 1965 war. The 7th of September also marked the day when the PAF attacked IAF airfields in the eastern sector. During the PAF's raid on Kalakanda, Indian pilot Flight Lieutenant A.T. Cook engaged 3 PAF Sabres, shooting down one and badly damaging the second Sabre. By this time, Cook had no ammunition left, but he successfully chased away the third Sabre. His wingman engaged the remaining one Sabre and shot it down. The war lessened in intensity after the 8th of September, with occasional clashes between the RAF and the PAF. Both air forces now changed their doctrine from air interdictions to ground attack and concentrated their efforts on knocking out soft-skin targets and supply lines, such as wagons carrying ammunition and armored vehicles. During the conflict, IAF English Electric Canberras raided a few of the Pakistani bases. On the 10th of September, one missed air was down by anti-aircraft fire in Pakistan, but the pilot ejected safely. On September 13th, one PAF F-86 Sabre was downed while attacking a train near Gurdaspur and the pilot was killed. In another encounter the same day between PAF Sabres from Sargodha and IAF Nats from No. 2 Squadron, an Indian Nat was shot down by a PAF F-86 Sabre flown by FLT-LT Yusuf Ali Khan, although the Indian pilot managed to eject safely. The other Nat was engaged and damaged in air combat by FLT-LT Imtiaz Bhatti. The experienced pilot somehow managed to return to base, where according to All India Radio the Nat's pilot later died of wounds sustained during the combat. He was said to have brought his damaged aircraft back to base and to have died during landing. His funeral was attended by the Indian president. Yusuf Ali Khan was credited with a kill, whereas Imtiaz Bhatti was credited with damaging the IAF Nat, despite the later confirmation that the pilot died of wounds and the Nat crashed during its landing attempt. Later in the night of 13-14 September, Indian Canberras undertook the deepest penetration of Pakistani airspace of the war, attacking Pakistani bases around Peshawar and Kohat, rather than bombing the Peshawar runway. However, RAF bombers mistook the Mall Road in Peshawar as the runway and dropped the bombs there instead. The Canberras were intercepted by Pakistani F-104 near Lahore, but they managed to evade the starfighter and return home safely. They also had an encounter with F-86 Sabres, one of which fired at the Canberras, which sustained some damage. A Pakistani F-86 Sabre also crashed while conducting an evasive maneuver in an attempt to escape pursuit from an escorting Nat as it tried to defend the Canberra bombers. The PAF pilot was killed. The Nat pilot, with C. Singh, was later credited with an aerial victory for this incident near Amritsar. Later, one Pakistani B-57 was shot down by anti-aircraft fire over Adampur, although both of its crew managed to eject safely and remained powers. On the 15th of September, the PAF employed a number of its Lockheed C-130 Hercules transport aircraft as bombers, which proved unsuccessful. Two of them were shot down by the IAF. The following day, one IAF Hunter and a PAF F-86 Sabre were shot down over Halwara. The IAF pilot was killed in the encounter, although the Pakistani Pakistani pilot ejected and spent the rest of the war as a POW. A Pakistani Cessna was also shot down that day, as well as an Auster observation aircraft. On the 18th of September, a Sabre was shot down by a Nat over Amritsar. The matter was reported by the collector, who had witnessed the entire dogfight. The same day, a Pakistani Sabre shot down a civilian Indian aircraft even after the civilian plane indicated its identity, the PAF pilot assuming it to be a reconnaissance mission. Years later, the PAF pilot wrote a letter to the Indian pilot's daughter to apologize for shooting down the aircraft. The aircraft had been carrying the then Gujarat Chief Minister Balwant Ray and his family. On the 19th of September, a Nat and two Sabres were downed over Chawinda. One of the Sabres that were shot down was credited to squadron leader Denzil Keilor, the brother of Trevor Keilor, who was credited with the first Indian aerial victory of the war. The following day, another two Hunters and an F-86 Sabre were lost over Kasur, Pakistan. The F-86 was vulnerable to the diminutive fallen Nat, nicknamed Sabre Slayer. The Nat is credited by many independent and Indian sources as having shot down 7 Pakistani Canadair Sabres in the 1965 war, while 2 Nats were downed by PAF fighters. At one stage the IAF was operating 200 air missions simultaneously. IAF fallen Nats of Nose 9 and 23 squadrons played a significant role in major air battles. On the 21st of September, IAF Canberras carried out a daring daylight strike into Pakistan against the radar complex in Baden. The raid proved to be successful. Under the command of Wing Commander Peter Wilson, 6 Canberras from No. 16 Squadron took off from Agra over 1,000 kilometers from Bladin and proceeded towards the radar complex at low level, about 80 miles short of the target. 1 Canberra climbed to an altitude of 10,000 feet in order to act as a decoy, before returning to base. The other 5 Canberras continued on towards the target. The flight then separated and 4 of the aircraft approached the target in 2 sections, each 2 minutes apart, at low level, before climbing to 7,000 feet, from where they carried out bombing runs, dropping approximately 10,000 pounds of explosives. Wilson then approached from the south at an altitude of just 30 feet, firing a salvo of 68mm rockets at the radar dome. On the same day, a PAF F-104 intercepted a Canberra bomber on its way back from Sargodha and shot it down, while one Hunter pilot, who was the son of Chief of the Indian Army, was shot down by anti-aircraft fire. He ejected and was taken POW. The ceasefire was declared on the night of September 22, 1965. Outcome: there are conflicting claims by either side on this issue. Pakistani sources suggest that Indian losses were in the range of 59 to 110 and Pakistani losses were around 18 to 43. Indian sources also claim that in terms of aircraft lost to sorties flown, the Indian Air Force's attrition rate was lower than the Pakistani attrition rate. Another factor which makes it difficult to determine the outcome of the 1965 Air War is the issue of aircraft lost in the air in air-to-air combat, or to ground fire, as opposed to aircraft lost on the ground due to bombing. India claimed that the large number of Indian aircraft losses occurred on the ground during the attacks on Kalaikanda and Pathankot, up to 60%, by some accounts, while most of the Pakistani losses were in aerial combat. PAF surprised the Indian Air Force, especially in strike missions where it destroyed numerous IAF aircraft. Pakistan attained unchallenged air superiority from the onset, allowing Pakistani ground forces to operate without danger of enemy air threat. Effect on future wars: much of the lessons of the 1965 war lead India to refine tactics which proved decisive in the 1971 1971 war. Pakistani forces failed to take account of the extent to which they had relied on two factors which the IAF could not take for granted: complete ground-based defensive radar coverage and an adequate supply of air-to-air missiles. Much effort was expended in India to remedy these deficiencies before 1971. With Soviet aid, India established a modern early warning radar system, including the recently introduced Fansongi low-level radar, linked with SAR-2 guidelines, surface-to-air missiles and a large number of AA guns. By December 1971, the RAF comprised a total of 36 squadrons with some 650 combat aircraft. Moreover, the 1965 war resulted in the USA imposing a 10-year arms embargo on both sides. This had no effect on India, which had always looked to Britain, France and even Russia for arms, but was disastrous for Pakistan, which was forced to acquire a 90-obsolete second-hand Sabre via Iran, a Mir-28 Mirage AIs from France and 74 maintenance-intensive Shenyang F-6s. It was unable to replace losses among its force of B-57s, or to acquire a modern interceptor in realistic numbers.